Finally, a good replica of the sword that everybody's been asking me for years. Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. Now, as you know, I've been working hard over the last couple of years on the Royal Armouries line with Windlass, and in fact we're now looking at the second batch. So the first batch has gone really nicely. We're now looking at the second batch, and you know, you're welcome to post suggestions of things you'd like to see in the second batch, or maybe the third batch, underneath this video. But this is what I'm here to talk about today. So, during the whole time I've been developing replicas with various companies, not just with Windlass, the one sword that people have asked me about more than any other is the 1796 Light Cavalry Saber. So I've noted in numerous videos over the years that regardless of what someone's primary interest is, whether it's medieval swords, Japanese swords, rapiers, it doesn't matter. Just about everybody I have known over 25 years of being involved with swords and the world of swordsmanship, everybody loves the 1796 Light Cavalry Saber. It doesn't seem to matter what your primary interest is in period or type of sword, everyone seems to want to get their hands on one of these. Now, as most of you will know, I run Easton Antique Arms, I sell antique ones. And so, you know, I get loads of them through my hands, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to get hold of good, original, antique 1796 Light Cavalry Sabers. And the prices have gone up and up and up on them. When I started collecting when I was in my late teenage years, they weren't very expensive and they were everywhere. And gradually they just became harder and harder to get and more expensive. So there is a massive demand for a replica because there simply hasn't been a good replica. Now, it's not to say there haven't been replicas of the 1796 Light Cavalry Saber in the past. There have been other companies that have retailed these. However, they have always been fraught with problems. They've either been pretty much of low quality materials, or they just don't look right, they didn't get the shape right, or the one or two replicas that I can think of that did kind of look right on a computer screen, the massive thing that they got wrong was the distal taper. The blade didn't start thick enough at the base, and it didn't taper off to thin enough at the end, and so therefore it didn't handle anything like the real thing. It may look on a screen like the 1796 Light Cavalry Saber, but it didn't handle like it. So my opinion was what we needed to do was simply copy an antique. So that, my friends, is exactly what I did. I sold an antique 1796 Light Cavalry Saber to Windlass. Now, I've got to admit, I was a little bit skeptical that they'd be able to copy it that faithfully. And in fact, this is a prototype that I'm holding here. It's not the final version. The final version has just arrived in a batch with Museum Replicas Limited in the USA. I'll link straight below here, and you can literally go and buy it now. Now, before you do, let me tell you a bit more about its features, because quite simply, they knocked it out of the park. I won't say this was their first attempt. In fact, there was an unsuccessful attempt before this, which I gave very strong and definite feedback on. And after that, that's when we decided to basically copy an antique exactly. So I met up with them one of the previous times they were in London. I gave them an antique one that was sent back to India, and that was replicated, and boy did they do a good job. Now, this one isn't perfect, as I mentioned. So first of all, I'm just going to mention this straight off the bat, because some of the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice this. The ribbing on the leather grip here does not continue underneath where the side ears, or langets if you want to call them that, from the back piece, this is called, come around, the ribbing stopped. That was literally the only flaw with this prototype. Hence, I've still got this prototype because it didn't really warrant me getting, you know, asking for another one at this stage. This is perfect in every other way. That was the only thing that needed correcting. And on the production models, as you'll see on the MRL website, they have corrected that, and the ribbing continues underneath as it does on the original one. So what are we looking at here? We are looking at a very good and very accurate steel scabbard, which incidentally, I know some of you out there thinking, I've got an antique one without a scabbard. Would this fit my sword? It might do, okay? I can't guarantee it because the taper and curvature of 1796 is not always exactly the same, but there's a very good chance that this scabbard will fit your antique because it was copied from an antique. Okay, so we've got a pretty much, and it's brazed in all the right ways, it's made in the right way, it's the right weight, it's got the right type of throat, it's got little screws holding the throats in on each side. It's really really good. The rings are the right proportions and right thickness. Great job. Now, let's get to the sword. First of all, I'm handling this somewhat gingerly. So literally 2 hours ago, I went and picked this up from a company who are sharpening swords professionally for me now. More about that in the future. But this sword was not sharpened when it came to me, although the production models from MRL come ready sharpened, so you don't have to worry about sharpening that. So this has been super sharpened. Now, as you know, steel scabbards can blunten blades, so you have to push the blade towards the back of the scabbard as you draw it out to make sure that it doesn't dull the edge. But I'm sure you can see, I'll move back actually so you can see on screen, the proportions of this are perfect. Okay, they are absolutely perfect. This exactly matches the antique that I sold them. Now, one caveat there, not all of the antiques are identical. Okay, so these were a pattern, but they vary slightly in the hilt proportions and the hilt shape and the nature of the guard. Sometimes they are slightly broader and sometimes they're slightly narrower. Sometimes they have a slightly more sort of blunted hatchet tip. Sometimes they're a little bit more pointy. So they do vary a bit. But I deliberately picked for Windlass a pretty average example of a 1796 like Cavalry Trooper's Saber, and that's the one that I sold to them, and that's the one that they copied here. And they got everything right, just everything. It looks exactly like the antique, and that's because they had the antique in hand to compare it with and copy. And they got the shape of the hilt correct, they got the materials of the hilt absolutely right. It's leather over, you know, with cord underneath. We've got the beautiful shape of the slight curving shape of the back piece here. We've got the shape of the pommel exactly right. It is peened there. It does, although you probably can't see it on screen, it does have a lateral rivet going through here, but then it's polished flush so it doesn't stick out in your hand. Some originals it actually sticks up, but some of them it is polished flat. This one's polished flat, but it does have a lateral rivet through there and is riveted at the top there, so very, very robust construction. The guard, the famous sort of letter P shaped guard, is exactly like on the original, and the languettes are exactly like on the original. It has a leather washer in there, exactly like the original. The blade, they've got the silhouette of it correct, and perhaps most importantly, and for the first time ever in a production made sword, I only know of people who've had custom swords that are this accurate, we have distal taper, boys. We have absolutely spot on distal taper, true to the original. Because I know you folk love distal taper, and it is very, very important to getting a sword handling like the original. Here are my digital calipers, and I will measure the blade at the very base of the blade. It is 8.6 millimeters. That's right, none of this 4 or 5 millimeter crap that you get out there. This is 8.6 millimeters thick, well, 8.5 it measured that time, but 8.6, 8.5 millimeters thick at the base of the blade. We come up only, you know, maybe about 20 centimeters, and it has instantly gone down to 4.6. So there's a big step down here, and that is true to the originals. Okay, we come up to the middle of the blade, it's 3.6. We go up to the center of percussion, it is 2.8. We come up to the foible of the blade, pretty close to the tip, and it has come down. Oh, let's get down to there, and we're down to about 2 millimeters. So this has historically accurate distal taper. Not only does it have historically accurate distal taper, I don't want to do this because this has just been cleaned and it's very sharp as well, but if you see the flex of the blade, you can see it flexes in the end third of the blade, and the base of the blade is completely rigid, as you'd expect with that distal taper. Not only has it got the correct distal taper, it's also got the correct width and depth of fuller, and it's got the correct edge geometry. The ones that you can buy from MRL will be sharpened straight from the shop. So here we go, folks, finally. And you know what? The price. I should mention the price. You can check out the link below yourself. And frankly, I think for what you're getting with this sword, I can't even imagine anyone else offering, even thinking about offering a 1796 like Cavalry Saber for this price that is this accurate, which as it happens is pretty much 100% accurate. It's very, very difficult to make a sword, a 19th century or 18th, 19th century sword of these proportions, this accurate, for that price. And you know what, the steel quality, I have had no issues whatsoever with all of the windlasses. I've chopped wood with them, I've cut through branches, I've cut every type of target you can think of. They hold an edge pretty well. They usually use at 1080, I think this is 1080, might be 1075, but it's carbon steel, well hardened, usually around 50 Rockwell. So they're usually pretty hard, and you know what, that pretty much closely matches the originals. The originals are carbon steel and they're around that hardness. So there we go, folks. Finally, at last, I know that so many people over the years, see how careful I'm being to keep that edge away from that metal throat. You could remove that metal throat if you wanted, because you've got that those screws there, or you could put a leather to make sure your sharp edge doesn't get dulled. Over the years, so many people, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about in YouTube comments, in YouTube messages back in when that was a thing, on Patreon, on my Patreon, you know, with my patrons, on Facebook, everywhere, people have said, Matt, can you do a replica of the 1796 light cavalry saber? Well, you know what? I didn't do it, Windlass did it. Link below to MRL where you can buy it directly right now. Give yourself a Christmas present. Fantastic price. I just don't think you could beat that anywhere. And there is literally no other company making a 1796 light cavalry saber as accurate as this, as well as this. And even if they were, I don't think they could match that price. Anyway, so check out that link. And now you can stop hounding me. You can stop hounding me for a replica of the 1796 light cavalry saber, because you know what? It's here, folks. Go and get yourself one. And I haven't cut with this because it's -7 degrees outside at the moment and everything's covered in ice. And I've only just got it sharpened and back today. But you can bet your bottom dollar I will be doing cutting videos with this at some point in the future when all of the ice has melted. And I'm really looking forward to putting this through some targets, because one of the most famous cutting swords of entire history is here. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you back on the channel again soon. Cheers, folks.